Good evening, everybody. I am in Pacific Daylight Time, so it's about 7:30 p.m. my time. I'm reading from Cavin Balaster's book, How to Feed a Brain: Nutrition for Optimal Brain Function and Repair. I am thinking about how we can make a group together and discuss things about what the right things to do are in life. And one of the right things to do is to feed your brain properly. I got this idea that I got this idea. I didn't get this idea. I got this book from um, having contact with Dr. Bertie Miller, who wrote Brain Rescue, and he and Kevin Balaster are friends, and they know each other, and they held a class together. It's called the Recovery. It's called the Rebound Recovery Group, and it's in on WhatsApp. So I just thought I'd let you know all that. Um, Today I'm reading from page 115, chapter 13, Gastric Feeding Guidelines, Gastric Feed Considerations for Clinicians. Now, this is all about people who have been hospitalized for brain injuries, and this is extremely important to me because you can have a brain injury and then look like you're okay and function for years in your life like I did, and just kind of not understand why things are so irritating. And that's one of the signs that I had of the brain injury. I was always having trouble with, at that time, fluorescent lighting was a big deal. We didn't have halogen lamps at the time. It was all incandescent, which was good and nice. And then there was fluorescent lighting. And fluorescent lighting used to flash in my eyes and irritate me and give me headaches all the time. So here is gastric feed considerations for clinicians. The chart below is adapted from the article written by Laura Schoenfeld, MPHRD, concerning blenderized tube feeding in pediatric patients. It details step-by-step considerations for determining if blenderized tube feeding is appropriate for a patient. In it, if we change the word parent to patient or caregiver, the same criteria applies to patients of any age. This is a list of the minimum criteria for clinicians to consider before switching to a blenderized tube feed for a patient. Okay, these are considerations for determining if blenderized tube feeding is appropriate. I'm going to redo this entire chart right here. This is a flow chart, and it goes from patient requests blenderized feed to patient is at least 6 months old. Tube is a gastronomy tube, not jejunostomy tube. Tube is greater than 14 French in diameter. Patient does not require continuous feed. Patient is not on a fluid restriction of less than 30 ounces a day. Patient does not have a severe volume, patient does not have severe volume limitations such as delayed gastric emptying. Patient does not have multiple food allergies, and family has adequate financial or material resources, e.g. a blender or refrigeration, etc. And family displays time, motivation, and understanding of commitment required, and registered dietitian is available for oversight, and blenderized food by gastrostomy tube is appropriate if all of these factors are okay. If the patient is a realistic candidate for these gastric feeds, to better support brain function and repair, we can order a Feed-A-Brain approved gastric feeds, feedabrain.com/feeds. If making our own blenderized feeds, follow the instructions outlined in the gastric tube feed creation instructions handout on page 113 and also available online. For your convenience, printable PDF copies of all handouts and charts can be found at feedabrain.com/handouts. A letter to clinicians. To clinicians, the author says, I first want to acknowledge and thank you for being open to helping families provide their loved ones with a better chance at recovery through nutrition. As you know, food is where we derive the building blocks for the function and repair of our brain and body. Powerful changes can be made for your patient's health through nutrition and supplementation. My name is Cavin, and my intention is to improve gastric feed nutrition for patients. In 2011, I sustained a TBI, a severe diffuse axonal injury. Statistically, over 90% of patients with this injury never regain consciousness. For months after waking from a coma, I didn't eat, walk, or talk. My left hand was completely flexed inward. I was breathing through a tracheotomy, and I was receiving nutrients through a PEG tube in my belly. Hi there, Sonia Placentia. At one point in my recovery, I am reading from a book titled How to Feed a Brain by Cavin Balaster. He actually, I was reading his letter to the clinicians right here. He said he got into a coma. He fell off a building. He got into a coma. For months, he didn't eat, walk, or talk. His left hand was completely flexed inward, and he's shown us it was like this. It was like this. He couldn't move his fingers or anything. Um, At one point in my recovery, he says, I was steered towards a nutritional protocol and I began to regain mental clarity. For over 6 years since then, I have been studying neurometabolism, nutrients involved in neuroplasticity, and other aspects that influence brain function. Now, this applies to all of us. Even if you haven't had a traumatic brain injury, everything you feed yourself, he says, either is toxic to your brain or helpful to your brain. There's no other way about it. So, for example, candy is not good for the brain, etc. Okay. So he says here, I have collaborated with practitioners of many different specialties in order to better understand our brain function and what safe and effective interventions can be utilized to optimize patient outcomes. My recovery has been called miraculous, and I owe that in large part to nutrition. Now, I help others with brain injury and neurodegenerative disease. That's something like ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and those are neurodegenerative diseases where the brain starts to lose function with certain parts of itself, and the body can't. For example, my friend that passed from ALS had a was fine, would just walk around doing all kinds of things. Then one day she started falling down, and then later she wound up in a wheelchair, an electric wheelchair, really fast too. They knew her situation was getting worse. The average, she said it was 2.5 years. The average time from diagnosis to death for ALS patients was about 2.5 years. Boy, oh boy. Anyway, so this gentleman here is helping people with brain injury and neurodegenerative disease, but we can all, even if we haven't had any problem with our brain, we can all benefit from this and make our brains more powerful just with all the tools that he's got here. He says, you can learn more about me at feedabrain.com and adventuresinbraininjury.com. As a clinician, you may hold the keys to unlock a patient's recovery by advocating for better nutrition. Recovery can be supported through one, fish oil supplementation, and two, real food blenderized gastric tube feeds. Fish oil supplementation, possibly the most powerful therapy that we can do for brain injured patients patient is to introduce high dose fish oils into their diet, especially those high in both EPA and DHA. I'm just wondering if we want to keep on reading to the end. We do have quite a few more pages. It's like four more pages after this. So, what do you think, Sonia? Do you think we want to read it all the way? I don't mind if you don't. Um, Research shows the importance of this nutrient to brain health, brain injury treatment, and neuroprotection. In 2011, an article in Military Medicine, the official journal of the Association of Military Surgeons of the United States, AMUS, wrote that, quote, a comprehensive, coordinated research program to evaluate the multiple uses of N3FA, omega 3 fatty acids, should be a high priority for the Department of Defense. Wow. Lewis Michael D. and Julian Bales, neuroprotection for the warrior, dietary supplements with omega-3 fatty acids. Do you understand this? Military Medicine. It's a magazine. They printed that out. Additionally, in 2013, the American Journal of Emergency Medicine presented a case study about a teenager who suffered a severe TBI and was given an initial GCS of 3. 10 days after the injury, he was given a large dose, 15 milliliters, which is about 13 grams, twice a day, 30 milliliters per day, of a high quality fish oil via his PEG. On the 21st day, he was weaned off the ventilator and soon progressed from vegetative state to attending his high school graduation. 3 months later, Lewis Michael et al. Therapeutic use of omega-3 fatty acids in severe head trauma in the magazine, the American Journal of Emergency Medicine. This is not an isolated case, as other TBI survivors have also obtained similar results, which you can read more about at feedabrain.com/omega. Now, that website is really, really good. He's got tons and tons and tons of info on it. What about the risk of blood thinning? Some clinicians are hesitant to use high dose fish oils because there is evidence that they may thin the blood. An article published in the Journal of Neurotrauma, however, analyzes the literature and states that the overall clinical data suggests that DHA at doses of up to 6 grams per day does not have deleterious effects on platelet aggregation or other clotting parameters in normal individuals. And fish oil does not augment aspirin-induced inhibition of blood clotting. That's by Hassadri et al. Fatty acids as a omega-3 fatty acids as a putative treatment for traumatic brain injury in Journal of Neurotrauma. Therefore, fish oil supplementation in doses up to 6 grams per day does not appear to have the blood thinning effects that had raised concerns. We have organized much research on the subject of omega-3 and their effects in preventing and treating brain injury at feedabrain.com/omega. Real food blenderized tube feeds. Surprisingly, most enteral formulas fed today contain processed ingredients like corn syrup, canola oil, sugar, corn maltodextrin, and soy protein isolate. Many of these ingredients have been shown to contribute to neurodegeneration and inflammation. These ingredients are not quality nutrition for anyone to live on, let alone someone who needs to heal after injury or throughout the disease process. Instead of using these feeds, we can use tube feeds based on real food nutrition to better support your patient's recovery and health. There is a convenient handout showing the considerations for determining if blenderized tube feeding is appropriate, available online for your use at feedabrain.com/gastric. When it comes to creating or purchasing real food gastric feeds, we have created a gastric tube feed creation instructions handout, which can also be found at feedabrain.com/gastric. In addition, we have gathered a list of available pre-made feeds at feedabrain.com/feeds. We believe these types of feeds provide superior nutrients for brain health and recovery when compared to processed formulas. Collaboration for the patient's well-being. Both you and the loved ones of the person you are caring for want the patient to get better. So I hope that you are all open to allowing or requesting that your patients be administered fish oils and or to be fed the real food feeds outlined here. Additionally, we're building a team of collaborative medical professionals to influence change. Together, we can make a positive change in the standard model of neurorehabilitation, and we can help prevent neurological degeneration for everyone. If your heart breaks as you watch patients deteriorate on the currently used feeds, I ask you to join us in this quest to improve hospital and gastric feed nutrition by signing up at feedabrain.com/collaborate. I have so much appreciation for your profession and the work you do for patients every day. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope this information will be useful to you in the treatment of your patients. Sincerely, Cavin Balaster, feedabrain.com, adventures in braininjury.com, author of How to Feed a Brain, Nutrition for Optimal Brain Function and Repair. So he wrote that letter in this book. Now, the end of this chapter, gastric feeding guidelines. We've got this much left. Practical tips for gastric feeding. Since I had a gastric tube myself, I learned a few things that made it easier. I can share a few helpful practical tips based on my own experience. That's what he says. He says, blenders, in order to make these feeds to a consistency that can reliably be fed through a gastric tube, one of the tools needed is a high-powered and high-quality blender like a Blend Tech or Vitamix. Their abilities are quite impressive, and they each come with a several-year warranty. You can find these blenders at feedabrain.com/tools. Lower quality blenders cannot blend the food to the smooth consistency needed for tube feeding, so the tube can get clogged. In a hospital setting, the smooth consistency is imperative. It means it's absolutely necessary. It is also highly recommended if feeding at home, since cleaning a clogged gastric tube is a time-consuming and difficult ordeal. I never thought I would spend hundreds of dollars on a blender, but my blend tech has changed my life by allowing me to get more things done with less time in the kitchen. I can swallow without any restrictions these days, so I don't need my meals blenderized, but I also enjoy these foods even as smoothies and pureed soups, usually when I'm too busy to cook. I still cook when I want to cook, go out to dinner, and regularly eat delicious meals, but I no longer have any reason to not get in the produce I know is optimal for brain function and repair. So he eats smoothies because the smoothies make it easy for him to get the nutrition into his body. Now, I have attended a class by a Dr. Vong, Vuong, Jeff Long, and he said the same thing, that you need to get the nutrition into your body. So when you blenderize it, you drink it, it becomes like a non-issue. you know? It's like you don't have to spend hours cooking in the kitchen. Now, storage, and we're close to the end of this part. If there is leftover after the first feed, seal it in a container and refrigerate for use within 24 hours. If feed is not going to be used for over 24 hours, freeze for later use and then use within 12 hours of thawing. Enzymes and gastric feeding. Again, gastric tubes skip the first stage of digestion when the food is chewed and mixed with saliva in the mouth. Saliva is important because it contains special enzymes, namely amylase, an enzyme that breaks down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars to prepare the food for the next phase of digestion in the stomach. Because we are skipping this step, we are going to want to add digestive enzymes to our gastric feed. For products that are designed to include important enzymes, especially for when the first stage of digestion is skipped, like in gastric feeds, go to feedabrain.com/enzymes. While enzymes can be very beneficial, Dr. Walls, Wahls, and I, Cavin Balaster, have discussed this topic, and we both agree that nothing beats the real thing. With this in mind, let's talk about a method that can be done in addition to or in place of digestive enzymes. The best way we can mimic the first stage of digestion is bypassed in gastric feeds is to collect our saliva throughout the day and add it to our smoothies and blended soups after they've cooled. I know it may sound gross, but by holding digestive bitters in the mouth or by chewing on something bitter like kale or mustard greens, saliva production is encouraged, which can be added to gastric feeds for better digestion, especially if gastric feeding is long term. Either drop a few drops of digestive bitters in the mouth or chew on kale or another bitter green about 30 times. Then spit out the mixture of saliva with digestive bitters or greens to add to a soup or smoothie. Dr. Walls says that adding 1 to 2 tablespoons of saliva to your tube feedings is beneficial, but any amount is helpful. Okay, so we've read this part here, and it's kind of an extreme way um, to consider taking care of oneself. But if you think about it, you're really giving your brain as much power as you can. And that's what we need to do. When our brains don't work, our bodies are useless. It doesn't matter if we've got a great, great athletic body, if our brain is really hard to handle. And people often, you know, when we abuse any substances, then we're using something that is toxic to our brain. So please, please consider that brain health is important to the whole world's virtue, chi, external, electric field, energy, everything. Okay? Talk to you soon. Old Kinderhook.